So, hello guys out there in the world. Let me see. You can't see me yet. Here we are. So, I've got Brian Festa live with me, and I just wanted to read this to you guys real quick before we get into it with Brian. So, this just came out today. From the newsroom, State of Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont announced a new system of fines to be enforced against those who violate COVID-19 guidelines. I repeat, guidelines. They include $100 for violating the mask order, $500 for organizing an event that exceeds size limits, and $250 for attending an event that exceeds size limits. The order is anticipated to be signed tonight with an effective date sometime this week. Hey Brian, how are you? Let me just make sure I can see your vocal. There we go. Yeah, how are you doing?
How's it going? I was a little bit better before around 4:30 or whenever this came out this afternoon. This is insanity. How far is this guy gonna keep pushing it?
I'm just stunned. And well, here, let me just pull up this other slide so that people could see this over here. What he put here, look at this. Now, this is just crazy. It says that, the new fines for a violation, we got $100 for the mask, $500 for organizing an event that exceeds size limits, $250 for attending an event. And then what really blew me away is it says fines can be issued by law enforcement, local chief elected official designees, and local public health. What the heck?
The mayor,
Uh-oh, you froze up on me, Brian.
secretary.
It froze up on me for a second. I'm sorry. Repeat that again. It just froze up on me a second.
No, so the mayor could send out his secretary to go give you a fine.
So the mayor's secretary could come out.
Designate anyone basically that works for the town. All right, anyone who works for a town, local government, municipal government, the Department of Public Health, the local health department, law enforcement. Basically, there's thousands of people now in the state that could fine you. And think about this, Jen. So here's the reality. I organize an event. Let's say I organize an event, as we do many events at the Connecticut Freedom Alliance. Let's say I organize a rally. I would be subject to $850 in fines if I were there without a mask. Because I organized the event, that's $500, $250 for being at the event, and then another $100 on top of that for not having a mask on. So myself and you and whoever else was organizing each of us could be fined $850, and then every person there who was there without a mask would be fined $350.
Oh my God.
Insanity. And this is not constitutional. And I'm going to make the argument for that. And I want to share some, I want to start, before I really get into that, I want to share some good news from today.
Okay, good news is good, because I'm not feeling good right now.
I know, but I wasn't either until I saw this decision that came out.
Oh, yes.
A decision in Pennsylvania came out today, a federal court decision. Oops, I just deleted something. I hope it wasn't something I need. Sorry, I'm going too fast on my phone. This decision came out today from a federal court judge in Pennsylvania who ruled that Governor Tom Wolf's COVID-19 orders, executive orders, are unconstitutional. He said forcing businesses to shut down entirely and the governor's stay-at-home order are both unconstitutional. And he said, in his 60-page opinion, the judge wrote, "There is no question that this country has faced and will face emergencies of every sort, but the solution to a national crisis can never be permitted to supersede the commitment to individual liberty that stands as the foundation of the American experiment." How beautiful is that? And I want to read something else he said too, which was really struck me as really inspiring, really, I should say, because you don't see judges come along like this every day.
No,
all right?
You don't.
Here's what he said. The Constitution cannot accept the concept of a new normal where the basic liberties of the people can be subordinated to open-ended emergency mitigation measures. He also said The liberties protected by the Constitution are not fair weather freedoms in place when times are good but able to be cast aside in times of trouble. God bless him.
That's
Let's just say I really want to give credit William Stickman IV, U.S. District Judge William Stickman IV. I would love to have, now judges don't usually comment publicly on opinions, but I would love to have him on for an interview.
yeah, that would be
awesome.
Absolutely.
I am so inspired by this. Now, some people are asking, does that overrule Lamont then, because that's a federal judge? No. And the reason why is this was a federal district court decision in Pennsylvania. This is not the district that we are in. Our district does not include that district in Pennsylvania. We are in, we have the district courts of Connecticut, okay? And the only decisions that would be binding federally, of course, are Supreme Court decisions, any decisions of the Second Circuit, because that's our circuit, okay? And any decisions from the district court in Connecticut. But a district court decision in Pennsylvania would not be binding. Now, that's not to say that it couldn't be used as persuasive evidence and as an argument, and we would use it if we're bringing action in federal court. And I think of people like Lindy that still have their lawsuit pending in federal court, his lawsuit, I should say. He can definitely quote this and should quote it, and I'm sure he will, as persuasive argument, as evidence from a sister circuit, so to speak, another, close by. I mean, Pennsylvania is not that far away, district court to say, look what's being done here. So that gives me a little bit of hope. I don't want everyone to be dismayed. The problem is, in order to get into court, you have to actually have suffered some injury or be in imminent harm, imminent danger of suffering in injury. In this case, though, if they start issuing these fines, everyone who gets a fine will have suffered, even if it's just a $100 fine, which is very interesting. But everyone will be subject to it. We'll have standing to bring a suit in court. But I want to say something. The $100 piece, that's the basic fine for everybody walking around without a mask. If you're in a store or if you're in any kind of gathering and you're not wearing a mask, they can issue a fine. The $100 part kind of got me, because that's the equivalent money, today's money, in today's money, to the fine that was imposed in Jacobson. And that's the case that's always brought up. The government it was a $5 fine in Jacobson, but it's about $100, maybe a little over $100 in today's money. Okay, so it's very interesting. They're using the same playbook. Now, the Jacobson decision, again, is oft quoted and oft cited by attorneys and even by judges for standing for the proposition that you can suspend the Constitution, you can suspend constitutional liberties during a time of a public health crisis. But of course, that's not what Jacobson said. And I've quoted so many times before, and I just did it during the marathon not last weekend, but the weekend before. Again, the quote from Jacobson, where I'm not going to read the direct quote, but where the court says that, if there's extreme cases of overreach, the court can step in. It does say in Jacobson that the police power of the state during times, obviously, of crisis, of a public health, in that case, of a public health emergency, where there was a real emergency, they can step in and issue fines for failure to vaccinate in that case. So that's obviously a decision that does not seem to stand in our favor. But the difference always comes down to the data. Okay, there were dying in large numbers in 1904. Okay, when this was happening, 1903, 1904. By the time the case got up to the Supreme Court, it was 1905. But there were a lot of people actually died, large numbers of people from some virus.
Wow. I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit on me. Are you there, Brian? Sorry, the Skype is being strange.
Yeah, I'm here. What was the last thing you heard? I'm sorry.
I pretty much got the gist of it. Just to just recap, just a half a second backwards about the Jacobson decision.
So, I mean, it was different because that wasn't a pandemic. That wasn't a hoax. That wasn't a made-up virus. Now, maybe the vaccine wasn't as effective as it should have been, and maybe that's not what cured smallpox, and we can talk about that all day long, and I'd love to have that conversation another time. That is fair game, but there's no doubt that there really was a smallpox epidemic at that time. Okay, that really was happening. There was data. You could see all the people dying. I mean, there were throngs of people dying everywhere. It wasn't like this where they're just telling us that it's so dangerous, but we don't actually have the evidence. And the data doesn't support it. And the CDC's own numbers don't support it. So I think you can make a distinction. What you're always supposed to do when you have bad precedent as an attorney is you distinguish the facts. So you look at this case and that case and say, well, this case isn't quite the same because the same thing isn't happening here as what was happening there. And that's why that doesn't control, that decision's not controlling here. And so that's what we would do in a case like this. So Jacobson, contrary to what Alan Dershowitz says, Jacobson doesn't allow the government to do anything they damn well please during a public health emergency. However, the Supreme Court has ruled more than once that the state does have a police power that it can exercise to infringe on to some degree on constitutional rights. There's the Prince versus Massachusetts decision, Zuck versus King. There's several Supreme Court decisions that have followed Jacobson that have said that. So, but again, those facts are all distinguishable. I mean, one of those cases that I just cited, it was a woman who was allowing her daughter to sell religious pamphlets out in the street instead of going to school and getting an education like she was supposed to. And she claimed that was her religious liberty. That has nothing to do with what's going on now. It wasn't during a public health crisis, and it wasn't about vaccination in schools or anything like that. But they saw, the Attorney General Tong actually cited that in response to our letter from the legislators. The letter that went from the legislators in 2019, and said, well, that's why the religious exemption can be eliminated. Like, what does one have to do with the other? So in September of this year, this month, we're in September, right? September 21st, we're having a special session. And there is chatter that they are going to be pushing a flu vaccine mandate. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear. It froze up a little bit, but it all came through. So,
yeah, you froze too on my screen. Flu vaccine mandate is what the chatter is behind the scenes that they're going to try to push in this special session. September 21st, folks, is a week from today.
Wow, so that's been announced. So, guys, that's breaking information.
It has not been the special session has been announced. The flu mandate has not been announced.
Okay.
That's rumor. That is rumor and speculation. So I do not have that confirmed. But I did receive confirmation that they're planning to do the session on or about the 21st. So maybe it's the 21st, maybe it'll be the 22nd.
But it's coming in the next week. So next week, we're going to be in special session. It's very possible. We don't have confirmation of that, but very possible that the flu mandate could come up. As well as them mandating, I would assume, the COVID vaccine as well. We'll see.
That we don't have yet, but yeah.
Yeah.
I can't imagine passing a law for something that doesn't exist, but
well, he's passing all of these executive orders outside of the scope of what our law is, because my understanding is that he had 6 months and it's non-negotiable unless the legislature, the full legislature votes, not just this 10-panel committee that he threw together with people from public health, standing members of public health and or ranking members, I'm sorry. And then his, of course, the House and, majority leaders there. As far as my understanding of Connecticut general statute and our Constitution is, he's outside of the law right now himself with his extension of executive powers.
Well, I mean, there is a provision, and I have to find it now. I didn't know you were going to bring that up, but I'm looking at it now. There is actually a provision that does allow him to get those extended with a committee like that. Hold on. I just think, but the point is, the committee never should have allowed it to be extended because there's no data to support it. I'm getting it right now, 19A-131.
And that's an important point that I just want to elaborate with the audience. So when we're talking about the data, all of this, first of all, the Ferguson model that was the reasoning behind all these lockdowns globally and also here in the state of Connecticut has been totally and fully it's BS. It's been debunked. I hate to use that word, but it's not accurate. It's not real. It's not based in anything solid or real. It was all just fake science. I mean, what else can I say? That they manipulated this data and he got caught. And then not only did Ferguson get caught, he got caught when he was in quarantine with his lover who was married with a couple of kids, and he had COVID. You can't make this stuff up.
So yeah, I mean, it's just every day is like a movie, right?
Like
So
a bad science fiction movie.
yeah, 19A-131A subsection B does state that any declaration issued pursuant to this section, meaning an emergency, a declaration of a state of emergency, a public health emergency, shall become effective upon its filing with the Secretary of State and with the clerks of the House of Representatives and Senate. It says the declaration shall state the nature of the public health emergency, the political subdivisions or geographic areas subject to the declaration, and conditions, the conditions that have brought about the public health emergency, the duration of the public health emergency, and the public health authority responding to the emergency. Now, here's the part you were talking about. Any such declaration issued by the governor may be disapproved and nullified by a majority vote of a committee consisting of the president pro tem of the Senate, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the majority and minority leaders of both houses of the General Assembly, and the co-chairpersons and ranking members of the Joint Standing Committee of the General Assembly having cognizance of matters relating to public health, meaning the chairs of the Public Health Committee, the co-chairs, who were there. I believe Abrams and Steinberg were there. Such disapproval shall not be effective unless filed with the Secretary of State not later than 17, but they didn't disapprove it. The point is, it never should have been disapproved. So it is in the law to do it that way. But the point is, it never should have been disapproved. And this law needs to be changed. The governor should not be able to unilaterally, on the basis of no data, that there needs to be a new law that says the governor cannot even issue an emergency unless he proves with the data that there is a certain rate or certain risk of death or death rate or something. He needs to actually, and not just risk of an infection, you need to show risk of serious injury or death. I mean, being infected with the common cold is not a public health emergency. And guess what? The coronavirus, the common cold is a form of coronavirus. Okay? Yeah. So they call this a novel coronavirus. So it's so much worse. And for certain people, it is. But guess what? Most of the people that died had serious comorbidities. And if not for those comorbidities, would not have died of COVID. The number of people that actually died from COVID is such your chances of dying from COVID, it's like 1%, right? The CDC's new numbers, it said like 1% of people are dying just purely. I mean, first it was 6%, but I just saw something new that came out yesterday that said like 1% are actually pure COVID deaths. So this is such a hoax, all right? The virus is real, but the threat is not what they are portraying it to be. All right. And that's not medical advice because I'm not a doctor. So let me just put that disclaimer out there. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. But I'm telling you, if you look at the numbers, no reasonable person, no logical person can come to the conclusion that this warrants shutting down the entire economy. Away their liberty to move, liberty of movement, you know, and putting a mask on their faces and shutting down businesses, running small businesses out of business. I mean, all of this is just absolutely insane and not letting people gather. So what do you have? You are restricting their freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, literally by putting a muzzle over their face, but also because you're not letting them gather and speak. So freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of, if it's a religious gathering, obviously that would be freedom of worship, right? Free exercise of religion. I mean, the list could go on and on and on as to what these executive orders are doing. These fines, it is my opinion, all right, just my opinion, not official legal advice, but my opinion that these fines are unconstitutional and if challenged in federal court would be struck down. So if I am fined, I will be filing something, okay? If you are fined, you make that decision. I'm not telling anybody to wear a mask or not wear a mask. That's an individual decision. That's not for me to say, but I will tell you that if I get one of these fines or multiple fines, there will be a lawsuit filed.
Yeah, now one of the things, okay, so because I think people are really, really upset about this. So one of the things that I was wondering about with this, so there is an event planned for October the 3rd up at the state capitol. Now, when people are gathering in protest at the state capitol, do these fines, are they applicable to this particular situation? Because they shouldn't be applicable at all, but I'm just curious in that type of environment where you're up at the Capitol and you are protesting these mandates in general, and would that be considered an event? You know, because I mean, what is this definition of event? And our protests anywhere, even if it's not at the Capitol? What does that all mean legally?
Well, I mean, again,
Oh, you're frozen up on me. Oh no.
has the right to super. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you
Can you hear
now.
me?
Yeah.
All right. I don't listen. Just to begin and to be clear, my opinion is that none of these executive orders are valid. No law that violates the Constitution is valid. A law that violates the Constitution is per se invalid. Okay, that's
Yeah.
number one. Number two, these executive orders, I don't believe. I could be mistaken, Jen. How many he's issued, but I don't believe they specifically made a distinction about an event that is for a protest and an event that is just a general gathering for a non whatever civil disobedience, non-protest. There was a distinction between religious gatherings. I believe religious gatherings had a limit of 50 people, whereas non-religious had 25. If I'm not mistaken. So there was a distinction there, but I don't believe he ever made a distinction between gathering for a protest and just gathering for like a party. I could be wrong about that. I'd have to go back and look at them, but I've read many of these executive orders, and I don't remember ever seeing a distinction between a protest and a party. So it's my understanding that if we did organize a rally, a protest, there would be fines issued
Wow.
if the police choose to enforce this. Again, that's going to be a decision left up to the enforcers. I mean, an executive order only has teeth if there are actually people enforcing it. If none of the public health officials and none of the cops and no one from this Department of Public Health or anyone else, state or local, if nobody chooses to issue the fines, then it basically.
Oh no. Sorry,
Everyone
guys.
forces people are
Sorry, you.
power hungry over this. You see the I'm sorry, people are power hungry over this. You go to Costco and see the pimple faced 17-year-old waving his finger in your face and telling you that you have to get out of here because you don't have a mask on. I mean, it's like you know what I mean. I mean people are power hungry. They're drunk on power. So I can't imagine that you're not going to have people enforcing this. My again, if I'm not giving advice, but my opinion is if you walk around in public places, in public gatherings, in stores and businesses, at rallies, events, if you do that without a mask, you have a high likelihood of getting a fine or two fines.
And this can be the way this, or the way he's going to present it from what I saw in the press conference, is that I just said this earlier when we went live together, how it's like, these officials that he, so it could be the mayor, a secretary of the mayor's office, like any public delegate, person that, the public health. I know in my town, they're all about, pushing the masks, and they've had our little newspaper, which comes door to everybody's door. The commissioner of the health, in my district is very much into Governor Lamont's mandates, and I could see being harassed in the grocery store. Now it's not only being harassed by the militant maskers who really have, I don't know, they got a butt into your business. You're 6 feet away from them. You're minding your own business. Now you're gonna have to worry that the secretary in the first selectman's office is gonna give me a ticket. What is she gonna be walking around with? Like how is this? What world did we wake up in that a governor can do this? And even in the press conference, it said on there, here, I'll pull this slide up again for you guys to look at. Look at how it says, notice how it says the guidelines, okay? Or, I'm sorry, that was in the original press here, where it says the guidelines. Let me pull this up real. Sorry about that, guys. So he's got, for the guidelines. So I'm just looking at what came out of
I can't see it, but that's fine.
So it just says here in the WINY radio report, it says the COVID-19 guidelines, which blows me away because they're acknowledging in that report that is absolutely, it's not a law, it's a guideline. It's just insane. So they're going to fine you for not following these guidelines.
Yeah, but you know what? They did the same thing with the school mandates, for the school mask mandates. They called them guidelines, but then inside the document, once you actually flip through the pages, it says requirements. all students must wear a mask when in school, except if you have medical condition, whatever. Which now is basically nullified. And I just want to touch on that. I know we're not here to talk
Yeah,
about
I
school
wanted to
masks.
talk about that. I'm glad you brought that up. Please do.
Okay. So there was an addendum filed, and I'm kind of like, stealing all my thunder from my weekly legal update that I usually do on Wednesday evenings. But I'm sure there'll be other stuff to talk about between now and Wednesday. And for people that missed it, I can talk more about this stuff. But they issued an addendum on August 31st, the State Department of Education, to now say, because the original document said if you had a valid medical exemption and documentation, whatever, the child could be exempt. Then they issued an addendum right before school started for most kids, or right within a day or two of it starting, that said, well, no conditions really should be considered exempt. Again, these are guidelines for the school districts to make their own decisions, but we're telling you, you really shouldn't exempt anyone unless they have COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder, from severe whatever diseases, or if they're recovering from a skin graft surgery around like their face and it's healing. So those are the only two classes of persons that can be exempt. And even if you meet that criteria, even if you're one of those two poor unfortunate souls that has one of those horrible conditions, extreme conditions, even they should not be allowed in the school because of the risk of complications from contracting COVID. Those persons should be given distance learning as an alternative. So basically, the conclusion of the Department of Public Health is nobody should be allowed in school with a mask. The Department of Education. And see, I'm getting it confused because it sounds like something public health would be saying, because that's something that this is the public health department's job, not the Department of Education's job. The Department of Education has absolutely no right to be issuing public health orders. No more so than DPH, Department of Public Health, has a right to be issuing orders about education and curriculum and when kids can graduate and stuff. That's not their purview. And guess what? Same with the Department of Education. It's not their responsibility or authority to be issuing directives about public health, even in schools. So it's absolutely despicable that they're doing this. They're shutting kids out of school. I can't tell you how many parents have called me either crying or on the verge of tears because their kids can't go to school, or they're going to school and trying to wear a mask, and the kid can't breathe. They're coming home with headaches. They feel sick to their stomach. They got rashes starting to form over here. I mean, I'm hearing reports from parents, and yet the schools are like, oh no, everything's fine. Someone just forwarded me an email today from her school district where the COVID director, she's the director of COVID at the school. This is a position. That your tax dollars are paying for. Because she took a summer course, and all the stuff that this person learned, they could be a doctor by now, they said. With everything I learned in the summer course about COVID, the fake data they were given in the summer course makes them a doctor. This person has no public health degrees or anything. All right. She's the director of COVID, and she has some other title too.
The director of COVID in a public school? This is George Orwell on steroids. I am flipping so pissed off right now. This is absolutely unbelievable, Connecticut. Unbelievable. Wow.
I know, and I'm getting fired up, and I'm sorry I'm louder than even normal because I'm mad about this. I called you tonight, Jen, about an hour ago, and I said, we got to go live. This is ridiculous. We have to expose this. I know you've been wanting to do a live with me anyway. Tonight was the perfect night, and so I'm glad I just happened to catch you because you're very busy, so you happen to have a little bit of time to do this. So I appreciate that. But yes, anyway, these parents are saying, anyway, I read this email, and this COVID director or something said, and just to let you know, Miss So-and-so, no parents or children have reported any problems. Everything's going fine. So, basically you're just delusional saying that your kids are having problems breathing because nobody else has reported that. Well, listen, number one, that's probably a bold-faced lie. Number two, even if it were true, most people are sheep and don't speak up. Okay, because they just want to be compliant, because they don't want to rock the boat. Most people aren't like you and I, Jen. Most people aren't going to march into the principal's office and say, cut it the F out, like you would and like I would. Okay, most people aren't going to do that because they're too damn afraid. It's not about respect and say, oh, well, I have more respect than that. You have more respect? What, to have your rights trampled, have the boot stomped on your face? That's what you call respect? No, we have more dignity, which is why we stand up for our rights. We have more dignity than those people. If you're complying because you're just scared If you're complying because you're just brainwashed or whatever, or if you're complying because for political reasons, because you hate Donald Trump or something, to me, you've lost your self-respect, you've lost your dignity. Well, no, that's what a lot of people are saying. Like, oh well, they blame Trump for all of this.
I know. Do you know what they're saying about Germany? So first of all, there's another huge protest being planned in Europe right now, and the Europeans are pissed off. You got England. Well, England isn't part of Europe, but you got Germany, and then you also got England. They're both simultaneously planning these protests. And you know what people are saying about the Germans? That they're neo-Nazi right-wingers for Trump. In Germany, the Germans don't care about Trump. Hello? They're not doing that because of Donald Trump. You people need to wake the freak up, because I'm so freaking sick of hearing that if you don't want to wear a mask, that you're some extremist right-winger. That's such a load of horse shit, and I'm tired of it. And the Trump derangement syndrome goes so bloody deep, it's absolutely disgusting and despicable, and it needs to freaking stop now. Come to your bloody senses for Christ's sake. I'm sorry. I'm so upset about this. This is mind-blowing. And I was just reading an article. Okay, so in Utah, I just saw this on Twitter. In Utah, they had a large protest in this area of Utah. I'm sorry, I forget the city's name. I want to say St. George. I think that's what it was called. And they had a big protest. Hundreds of parents showed up upset about the masking of their children. And do you know what the trending on Twitter, what the people are saying about these parents? That they're racist. Now, if you don't want to wear a mask, now all of a sudden you're a racist, you're a right-winger, and all these awful stereotypes, but yet they claim, people are claiming like it's love and tolerance and all this. But if you don't follow what they say is supposed to be right, then now all of a sudden you're the racist, you're an extremist. Basically encouraging people to hate those that are questioning, that are not wearing masks, that are standing up to these executive orders, and it just feels like Nazi Germany. Because I often think about what happened in Germany before Hitler took power like that. What were the people thinking? What were they doing? And this is this is the same type of propaganda. It's the same kind of thing. Let me just pull up, if I have this slide, I just want to pull this up. This is a picture from Stanford, if I have this correctly. So what I pulled up here, Brian, that you can't see, it's got one side, it says mask, considerate, member of community, health conscious, cares about safety, no mask, inconsiderate, danger to others, selfish, health reckless, not even spelt correctly, and insecure. I mean, this is coming out of the city of Stanford.
It's propaganda. It reminds me very much of the Nazi propaganda, Stalinist propaganda as well. I mean, it reminds me of those posters they used to put up. It's communism. It's communism. It's totalitarianism. It's government propaganda, and it's absolutely despicable that a public entity like that would publicly, discriminate like that. That would come out and say these people are bad people simply because they're not wearing a mask. Not thinking of the person who has a severe breathing respiratory disorder. Not thinking of the person who has severe anxiety disorder. Not thinking of the person who has PTSD from perhaps a sexual assault and can't have anything covering their mouth. Not thinking of the person on the autism spectrum disorder, children and adults. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. And we are not going to stand idly by while a tyrannical, radical, extremist government usurps our fundamental liberties. All right. The time is past for us to be silent. All right. We are not going to be silent anymore. That's why we've been standing up for freedom. Jen, you've been doing it a very, very long time, longer than I have. So I have to give you credit for that, because long before any of this COVID stuff happened, years before we even knew about this, you were fighting against a tyrannical government and the pharmaceutical industry. So, hats off to you. But those of us who haven't been doing it as long, we all need to jump on board. Even if you've never been active, if you've never been politically active, that's what the Connecticut Freedom Alliance is all about, because we are actually a lobbyist organization. My other organization, We the Patriots, we can't do any of that. But for Connecticut Freedom Alliance members, we encourage you to get politically active, to contact your representatives. This is an election year. They have less than 2 months. They have about 6-7 weeks until the election. Okay. The days are counting down. You tell them this is important to you. Your individual rights are important to you. You want that law that I held up on my phone, the 19A-131A, needs to be repealed and a new law replacing it, saying that the governor cannot declare a public health emergency. Not he can in almost every circumstance except maybe one or two. No, he cannot in almost every circumstance except the most extreme. Okay? Yes. All right. If there's a nuclear fallout or something, if we've been attacked, God forbid, and that's a real public health emergency. Everybody's being exposed to radioactive waste. All right, that's a public health emergency. All right, you can do something in there. But guess what? You still can't drag people out of the streets and put them in internment camps, which is what these FEMA camps are going to be. I mean, they're talking about. You heard about these camps in Australia, New Zealand, where they're putting people in there, and you can't be released until you test negative for COVID. You know, every positive test you get, you have to stay there. You're locked there. I mean, these are internment camps, is what these are. And I could see, FEMA doing something like that here. You do not have the right to hold people down and forcibly inject them with toxins either. So, I mean, it's regardless of the situation. But yes, you could think of some extreme public health emergencies where, yes, maybe the government would have to do something to protect people, but they're few and far between. And certainly this virus ain't it.
No, it's not. And we've gotten, just going back to the Ferguson model again, I just want to reiterate that to people that model was garbage. It was absolute garbage. There's an article about that and totally, just destroying the foundation that stood upon, which was nothing. It was sand. And the mainstream media ignores that. And all of these lockdowns are based on false data. And so people have a hard time understanding that. I'm not saying that there was not a gain of function type virus, because that's what I'm thinking this is. And that's people who are old in nursing homes, like in Connecticut, 70% of the deaths or close to 70%, it was like 68% of the deaths in Connecticut happen in nursing homes. That's also in New York. And if we look across the country, those are the numbers that we're seeing, that they were in the elderly and the infirm population, which, by the way, respiratory illnesses commonly take the elderly and the immunocompromised. Even things like a common cold can be that debilitating. What COVID-19 is, the novel COVID-19 or coronavirus, is from the cold virus family. And the coronavirus is extremely common in the animal kingdom in general. It's interesting because I really thought they were going to hype it with the dogs, because I did see an article on Twitter saying how a dog died of COVID, and then all of a sudden they're saying, oh, no, don't worry about COVID in your animals. And way back in the day, and the CDC took this down, but they were saying to isolate your dogs, and it was really strange. So just the point is that all animal species, mammals, carry coronaviruses. They're very common on the planet. So the novel coronavirus has never even been isolated in a PCR test. And that's something that I find all these things that the governor's just pulling all of this information enabled by the media, which is heavily funded by the pharmaceutical industry. And if we take a look at the pharmaceutical industry and all of the vaccines that are being created and the billions and billions of dollars that our own government has been funneling into these various different pharmaceutical companies, and you can see it in Governor Lamont's press conference from last week, where Dr. Koh is raving about Moderna, Sanofi, Pfizer, and all of the leaders.
Moderna, that has never, ever manufactured a vaccine in their history, or any pharmaceutical product, any drug, okay? There was a video that is a must watch that I saw yesterday that talks about this vaccine by Moderna being used for transhumanism. Did you see that?
Yeah, I've been hearing talk about that. I haven't seen the video.
What the RNA, because this is an RNA vaccine, and what it's going to do to basically change our genetic composition. It is horrific. This vaccine will do more damage, and I said this during the Vaccine Safety Awareness Marathon. If you haven't checked that out, check it out at QC.
That was great, by the way. Excellent marathon.
You can, and thank you. Obviously, you were a big part of that. So check that out, because I talked about that this is a monster, this vaccine. It's a Frankenstein vaccine, okay? It's going to do more damage to the health, well-being, and lives, and it's going to cause more death than any vaccine that we've ever seen in the history of mankind. So I would be very, very, very wary of taking that. Anyone who's considering it, I'm guessing most of our viewers are not considering it, considering that most of the general public is not considering it. I don't know if you saw that poll as well, that most people will not get a COVID vaccine. And I mean, this is genius by Trump. I just have to say, he comes out and tells everyone this is a great vaccine. We're deploying the military and everything so that you can all get this fast track vaccine. You know, he's making it like this is my vaccine. This is the Trump vaccine. So many people hate him. You have all these pro-vax liberals that are just losing their minds. I'm not getting, my wife told me, one of her coworkers the other night just said, I'm not getting that damn Trump vaccine. This is a liberal pro-vaxxer. Liberal pro-vaxxer. He's made them into anti-vaxxers. This is great. This is like winning 2.0 here.
Oh my God. It's really just insane. I guess if we got to find some humor in this dark, crazy ugliness that we find ourselves in, and that our own governor now is issuing fines for public assembly gatherings, masks, being an event coordinator, putting stuff out there, so, we're not going to consent. So the one thing that I was wondering, does this give us the ability now, because you said yourself that you're definitely not going to tolerate any fines. So this, in some respects, we can fight these fines. So if you get fined, now we can get in front of a court. Will that happen? I mean, Lamont's closed up our courts, and I'm going to tell you, he is getting ready to shut the whole state down again. He's just fishing for it, because cases... He's looking at it's a case-demic now. It's not about severe illness or death anymore where the hospitals are overwhelmed. Now it's a matter of testing positive, and we know that the FDA has not approved an official COVID test because it has not been isolated. So the FDA is not even approving it. It's under an emergency usage authorization, which is total just ridiculousness. And not only that, if we go back to the masks, because this is a very interesting point on the masks, the FDA has no qualifications for masks. It's not approved the masks either. It doesn't have if there's a protocol to follow, like the masks have to be made with this or that or whatever. Another reason being that the science doesn't back it up. Okay, there's no statistical evidence that these masks are doing anything. We've been looking at masks for years because of the flu virus. So the flu virus, which is a deadly virus, and we've been looking and looking and looking. There's been studies and studies and studies and studies of masks and influenza. And none of those studies, none of those randomized controlled trial studies, because people talk about believe science, right? It drives me up a wall. Believe science, believe science. But then when you come up with science, people tell you that you're anti-science. And I'm like, this is so nuts. So
they only believe science if it gives you the answer that you want. You see, I was taught the scientific method, right? You have a hypothesis. This is what I was taught in school. You were probably taught the same thing. We're about the same age. I think maybe I'm gonna be nice and say that I'm about a few years older than you, Jen. Jen's been doing this a long 20 years, but she started when she was 5. So
yeah.
Anyway, what I want to say though is, with regard to, I just hold on a second. I just lost my train of thought because I was going to say something about court before, and that just popped back into my mind. I was just going to say, and I got this text too that just came through. With science, that's what I was saying. With regard to science, and people always saying, you're exactly right. I was taught the scientific method was that you have a hypothesis, right, that you're trying to prove. They don't use the word prove, I guess, in science, as Dr. Shaw corrected me the other night, but you try to see if there's evidence for that hypothesis, that you can confirm it somehow, okay? And so you do a series of experiments, and you have a control group, right? Yeah. And you have your other group that whatever you're testing is being subjected to, whether it's a drug or some other kind of experience or whatever. You have 2 groups or maybe multiple groups, but you test the control against the one that's the non-control, and then you see your results. But you don't create the answer first and then work backwards and say, well, you'll make up data to prove your answer. you'll try to find things that will prove. Well, that's what they're doing. They're trying to start with the end result that they want, and then trying to find data that will support that. But I did want to say something about court before I forget it, because you asked me a question about 5 minutes ago about court. Can we actually go into court? The courts have been shut down. The state courts have been, for a long time, were shut down. They're starting to reopen through virtual hearings and things like that. There are actual hearings going on now, but the federal courts have never shut down.
Okay.
They do some things remotely, but they have been having in-person hearings this entire time. Now you have to wear a mask to get in, okay? But they have been doing in-person hearings. So the federal courts is where we can still hold him accountable. And quite honestly, that's where I would file these actions. And I'll tell you why, for the simple reason that you have a better chance, let me just put it that way, of the outcome. Remember that federal judges are not appointed, obviously, by the state governors. They're appointed by the president. So a lot of people worry about politics getting into the judiciary, and it's not supposed to. All right. And this is not, I'm not here to say that, judges are all politically one way or the other. I don't believe that. And I think many, if not most judges, do try extremely hard to keep their politics out of it. But we're all human, right? We're all human, and that does kind of creep in even into our subconscious. But even if it is political, and there are plenty of people out there that have that belief. Like I said, I'm not going to say that I subscribe to it necessarily. But even if judges were to be completely political, well, then you'd have better odds, right, in federal court, because you have a lot of judges that are appointed by Republican or very conservative judges. Trump has appointed more judges in his first term than Obama did in all his 8 years.
Wow.
He's appointed a very high number of judges in very liberal circuits, which I love. So the Ninth Circuit, for instance, in California, La La Land, that's burning to the ground right now. God help those people.
Yeah.
And it's all climate change too, by the way, just so you know. It has nothing to do with the arsonists that are lighting all the fires.
Or all the dead trees that they've never dealt with.
Nothing to do with that. Nothing to see there. But anyway, he's appointed a tremendous amount of judges to the Ninth Circuit, Second Circuit, which is where we are. All of these extremely liberal pockets, he's packing the courts with conservative judges. So it's going to start swaying things. But again, it shouldn't be. I know it's widely reported in the news that way. Oh, he's conservative. And even the Supreme Court, there's a conservative liberal split. It shouldn't be that way. The law should be the law. It shouldn't be based on your political ideology. Okay? If the law applies one way in this situation, then when the same situation comes up, it should apply, or a similar situation, it should apply the same way. It shouldn't be based on who's deciding the case. We're a nation of laws, not a nation of men and women.
Yeah, that's a beautiful sentiment. And that's exactly the way I feel, is we are a nation of laws. And, what really saddens me is that our laws are being downgraded, like our constitution, like people are saying, oh, liberty and freedom. Oh, you're so selfish, and all this very emotive type reactionary things. Like people think if you're not wearing a mask, somehow that's a personal offense to them. And they're too attached to their feelings to all of what's coming out of basically the media and the government. Because let's just be real about where this is coming from. Instead of looking at it so personal, it's like people who are wearing a mask, they equate that with some kind of if you're not, you're against them, instead of it being what it is. Like I had someone say to me recently, they're pro-maskers and you're anti-maskers. It's not about that. It's about the government mandating that you have to do something to your body. My body, my choice. Look, that isn't just for people who want an abortion. That's nonsense. My body, my choice. That applies to everybody. I don't want to put a medical device on my face, because that's what a mask is. It is a medical device that you put on your face that blocks oxygen. It's just basic. Or they'll say, there was a meme going around of somebody peeing their pants. I mean, and if they have their pants on and they pee, less pee gets on you. I'm like, and then somebody made a comment over that meme, and I thought it was classic. They said, oh, so I bet that person thinks wearing a bathing suit in a pool when you pee isn't going to affect anybody else in the pool. And I thought, how amazing of an analogy, and how interesting it is, because we're in an atmosphere. We're in an atmosphere, and we are surrounded by things in the atmosphere that are minute to our eye, that we're in, that our
Right.
God-given beautiful
Yep.
natural immune system helps guide us through our natural environment and our atmosphere of air, of oxygen, and our bodies are designed to deal with it. So the government doesn't have the right to dictate what we do with our God-given bodies. That's the beauty of our Constitution and a Bill of Rights, that we are endowed by God, whatever you call God, whether you're Buddhist or and even an atheist, everybody is here on this earth by some divine form, a creator. Okay, we are endowed. That's what our Constitution respects. It doesn't put God in a box of dogma, or God in a certain sect of religious beliefs. What our Constitution does is says you are free. You are a free human being. And now, in this day and age, the media keeps honing in that wanting to fight for liberty and your basic freedoms is somehow like you're an idiot. And that's the farthest thing from the truth. And it disgusts me. We are a nation of law, not barbarians. We are not a nation of just men and women making up things because whatever, or the media is now dictating what is going to constitute truth or not truth. And the media is so dysfunctional and corrupted, it's disgusting.
Right. It is. It's just, like I keep saying, I sound like a broken record, but it's hard to believe that it's come this far so fast. And again, maybe it wasn't fast, but it seems like it, because we've been fighting those of us who have been in the medical freedom movement or in other rights movements. Like I've been involved in, you mentioned abortion, so I've been involved in the pro-life movement, and there's been a lot of different political causes that a lot of us have taken up, but I don't think any of us have ever seen. Well, I don't think I know none of us have ever seen a battle like this, where it's not just one battle.
It's multitude.
Like it seems like dozens and dozens of battles each new week, each new month that comes out. There's all these things we have to fight in so many places, and they're trying to overwhelm us. But they don't know us very well, because we're not the type that are going to back down. We are going to continue to fight. I do just want to close, because I know it's getting late. We're coming up on an hour. We do still have litigation ongoing. The Connecticut Freedom Alliance still has the school mask lawsuit, and we would greatly encourage donations. You can go to the CT School Mask Lawsuit group, or if you go to our homepage, which is ctfreedomalliance.org, you can see right on there, there's a donate button. There's a gray button, donate to the Connecticut School Mask Lawsuit, because the fees are getting very, very high. It's very expensive, but these kids are who we need to fight for most of all. I mean, I want to fight for everybody's rights, and obviously I care about adults getting fined for not wearing a mask and things like that, but kids that are being psychologically damaged for the rest of their lives, and physically harmed as well because of these masks, I mean, they're the ones we have to stand up for first and foremost. I mean, it's the primary reason why this is the lawsuit we chose to take on out of all the ones we could have taken on, because there were a lot of them we considered, and people were always asking us every day to file a lawsuit, but we just don't have the resources to do that. But when we were going to choose one that we were going to put our eggs in which basket, it was fighting for kids. That's the number one thing.
So, folks who just tuned in, and I want to put a link in there in the comments, so you can go to Connecticut Freedom Alliance. Is that .org or .com?
.org.
.org, and you can make a donation to the mass lawsuit, because there is currently a mass lawsuit, which we should do another live where we just exclusively get deep into that and tell me where that's going. But briefly, if you can you just give me a little bit of an update on what's happening right now?
So we're getting ready. We're preparing documents, getting ready to file a temporary a motion for a temporary restraining order, which is like a motion for a stay, to get an emergency motion, basically to put a stay on that mask order, so that the schools can no longer force kids to attend school with a mask on, and the state's order that schools must do so is invalid, and basically, not that it's invalid, but that it can't be enforced. A motion for a stay doesn't rule that it's invalid or unconstitutional. That's what the lawsuit is for, and you have to go all the way through the litigation to get there. That could take years. So in the meantime, when you ask for a motion for a stay, you say, well, kids are being harmed every day by this. Mm-hmm. We can't wait, a year or 2 years or 3 years to get an outcome. Meanwhile, all these kids have been hurt. So if there is even a reasonable possibility that we're going to be able to prove, a strong likelihood that we're going to be able to prove, I should say, that these kids are being hurt, then yes, the state, where we would be asking for a stay to be put in place, an injunction, so that this cannot be carried out. Because obviously, the last thing we would want, and the last thing the court would want, is to risk having innocent children hurt, seriously hurt, for a long, long period of time. And so, obviously, that's up to the court. They will evaluate all of the evidence we present. We intend to produce scientific evidence. We intend to produce expert witnesses to lay bare the science and expose the science on masks, and also to discuss the inadequacy of distance learning as an alternative, because it is not constitutionally adequate. So those are the things that we're doing. We're getting ready to file that we're hoping to have that filed in very short order. Again, what's one thing that has held us up a little bit is the lack of resources. When you have to, when you don't have a lot of money coming in to get those expert witnesses, or to get all of that research done. I mean, because every hour of research, I mean, if you're talking about legal fees of $350 an hour, even spending 10 hours of research, which isn't much, is $3,500. 20 hours, you can double that. Now you're up to $7,000. And that's not even a week's worth of work. That's like half a week's work. So, I mean, when you talk about legal fees and how quickly they accumulate, it's just very, very, very scary to think of. I mean, we're going to be getting another bill soon, by the way, and I'll share that with everybody. I like to do that. When I had the mask lawsuit, I mean, the DPH lawsuit, which is still ongoing in another form now. I'm back in court on that. And we can talk about that another time too, over the vaccine data. But when I had the initial DPH lawsuit, part one, and I was being represented by, as you remember, State Representative Cara Pavlik-D'Amato, I would show her bills. When I would get the bills, I would hold them up or post screenshots of them and say, look, this is how much it's costing. So people, you don't believe me that this is how much litigation costs? Here it is. And that always sparked donations when people could actually see it. Because it's like, which part of me, obviously I was grateful that I got a flood of donations after I posted, but part of me was like, really? It's like, really? You didn't believe me? You thought I was like making this up, that this is how much litigation costs? Until they saw the bill for $15,000, then they decide, okay, yeah, we better help them out. But it's like, trust me, the bills are coming, and we have many, many, many thousands of dollars to pay on this. So please, 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 please donate. I can't stress that enough. I didn't come on here tonight to plug the mask lawsuit, but obviously we're talking about masks. It popped into my head, and I did just have a communication with the attorneys today about expenses and how much this is getting out of control. So I really do want to, I will be sharing that as quickly as possible. So I'm just double checking my email to make sure the bill didn't already come through, because I asked for it earlier. I asked for the bill as soon as possible so I can share it with my members. So I'm just double checking that I didn't get the bill. Because if I got the bill, I'll show you right now how much it is. It's going to be, I'm going to fall out of my chair probably. I'm not looking forward to seeing this bill. No, it's not in there yet. Good. So I have one more, I'm spared for one more night.
Well, keep me posted on that, because I would like to just do a full show exclusively on the mask lawsuit in Connecticut. That's a big deal, guys. This is really, really important. And as with any of these mandatory medical procedures, and a mask is a mandatory medical device. As with anything, these things take a while to come out to the truth always floats. My mom taught me that. She's like, she'd always catch me if I ever was not being honest. And she always said, no matter what, you may think that a lie is, people are, you're going to get away with a lie, or a lie will, persist over truth. But at the end of the day, the truth always comes out. So what's unfortunate is the truth is going to come out, how detrimental and damaging these masks are for our children's health, for our own health, especially wearing it long periods of time. And that's all going to come up, and it's going to float to the top. It really is. How long that's going to take is anybody's guess. As it starts to, I'm already seeing the posts and complaints by moms about their children complaining, just like you said, headaches. There's a thing called mask acne. There's all kinds of, panic attack kind of thing. A child asked for a mask spray because they have difficulty breathing, because the same reason, like you were saying, that the education department, which since when does the education department dictate health practices? So this child has like a panic disorder, some mental health issues with the face being covered. And the child asked to take a mask break, and a teacher made the child face the wall, like being in the corner. And these are not only for your physical health, but your mental health. And that all kind of connects and into the overall well-being. And here are our children. You know, these adults will sit there and say, especially people with no kids who have no clue, and they'll sit there, what's a big deal? You wear a mask to go in the store for 5 minutes. It's like, first of all, that's such a terrible argument for shopping. Anyway, but for our children, what they fail to think about is the fact that these children are expected to wear masks on the bus, masks all day long. They get mask breaks.
Voice, by the way, that was funny.
What?
I like your Karen voice, by the way. That was funny. What are you gonna do? What's the big deal? Yeah, it's like all these annoying people. These annoying little piss ants is what they are. You know what I mean?
It's just too much.
Like, come on. You know, when did we become such a bunch of whiny ass sheeple? I mean, I just don't really understand how this happened to this country. You know, we used to be a really strong country of patriots. People like you and I, Jen, used to be in the majority.
Yeah,
that used to be most of the country, and it would be very rare to see someone who would just bow down to the government and comply with everything they said. But now
it blows my mind. Yeah, it blows my mind away. I'm just stunned by it. I'm stunned by, you know, the fact that people are just, you know, what I thought were people who were outside of the box thinkers. And I'm talking about you, artist community. I'm talking about you. I'm talking about my fellow artists. I'm pointing my finger. I'm talking about you. Where are those artists that are questioning and rebelling against the government? I'm talking about you, artists, because I'm like one of the rare few. There's a crew of artists growing, musicians and artists that are in the freedom and liberty movement, because that's what we're now becoming, a liberty and freedom movement in a land of the free, trying to preserve those basic fundamental rights and liberties that we are endowed by God. Okay, however you see God, I'm not trying to put this into a dogmatic structure or saying, because people misconstrue that all the time as well. It drives me up a wall. So I'm wondering what, with my artist community, who I see are very rabidly supporting the government, to the point where I'm like, I just sit there shocked. I'm like, oh my God, you're what? You're what? And all of a sudden it's like this jingoism, and it's like, you know, these slogans and this propaganda that is just, yeah, it's very discouraging.
Well, yeah, I mean, it used to be that was the community, right? Like sort of the hippie community that was civilly disobedient. That would be, you know, getting arrested on the steps of the court or the Capitol or something because they were having a sleep in or something like that. You know, I mean, those are, and I know I've hung around with those people in my past years as well too, and I know that I always thought they were rebellious types that didn't just fall in line with the government. But it's like nowadays, if you're liberal, if you're like far left, that means that you do bow to the government.
Yeah, what is up with that?
Which is weird. I don't understand that at all. But it's like they bow to, unless it's Trump. He's the only one they'll resist. But anyone who's a Democrat, anyone who's on their side, they'll just completely bow to, even if it's a draconian, tyrannical, you know, totalitarian type of order. That's fine. As long as you get a D after your name, you can tell me to like eat dog poop or something, you know, and that's fine. And I'll do it all day long. But if you have an R, or if you're Donald Trump, it's not really even about an R. They listen to Republicans too nowadays, as long as they're not Donald Trump. It's like, yeah, Donald Trump is so evil. He's the only one we have to disobey. Everyone else we can just bow down to.
All
and it's just
logic out the window. Somebody brought this up, and then we'll wrap it up. But I just wanted to show this picture because I did pull it in. A great point about the hypocrisy from our governor. I'm going to pull up this slide. You've probably seen this picture today, somewhere online today, Brian. But this is now somebody captioned it. I was framed just like Pelosi. But you'll see, here's Governor Lamont. His mask is crumpled up in his hand. He's not socially distancing. You got the guy in the middle who's crossing his arms and shaking other people's hands. And like, I go to shake people's hands because that's the type of person I am. I get people who are afraid to do that. But it's just really interesting how we're doing a collection here. I have a game everybody could play. Let's have some fun with this, okay? So we're doing this collection here. I spy with my little eye the hypocrite Governor Ned Lamont. and see how many pictures you can collect off of the internet and put a nice collage together. Then we could put it together and we could tag him on Twitter because he is a big old hypocrite. Just going to show that picture one more time. The hypocrite governor. There he is, Ned Lamont, in his country club style at the tennis club, Copper Valley Club, wherever that is. He was a part of the Roundtree Country Club, which he left because the Roundtree Country Club was all white people in Greenwich, and he left because he wants to, have this narrative that he's all inclusive and he likes black folks, which he is a eugenicist, okay, folks? He is a eugenicist. I have more on that. I'll get into that. I'll just hold that for now. That's my opinion.
He loves them so much that he's going to experiment on them with the COVID vaccine. As he exposed. By the way, I want to thank shout out to the Hartford Courant yesterday for publishing that story. Although they did not mention us, I'm glad that it's getting attention about the black community being very upset that Lamont is using them as experiments. I know, Jen, why they didn't mention us, even though we're the ones that broke the story. We're the ones that held the press conference on Thursday evening. And we did have news stations there, so they can't say they didn't know about it. We had NBC's Connecticut, WFSB Channel 3, and Fox 61. You were there. You saw them there. And the only one that aired video footage, by the way, was WFSB, but it was video footage from across the way, where she was all the way across the parking lot. She was too afraid of truth. But here's the thing, or coronavirus or something. But, they didn't mention us in that article as being the ones that broke the story. The reason they didn't is because their narrative is that we're a right-wing extremist group that's racist. And so for us to be coming out and saying that we're concerned that the black community is going to be experimented on, and we think that is racist, and that is the real story here, they wouldn't interview us. And it's not like they can say, well, you don't have credibility because you're just some white guy saying this. We had Dr. Aaron Lewis, who is a great African-American man and activist, and attorney Tricia Lindsay, who's also she's an African-American woman. They're speaking out against this. So they can't say, oh, you weren't representing the community, so that's why we didn't interview it. That's not true. We had representatives from the community there who had very strong words to say, and they were powerful, powerful speakers. Both of them were. You were there. You filmed it. Thank you again for doing that, as always. And you released clips as well that are edited so people can see those on your page, as well as the Connecticut Freedom Alliance page and the Twitter page at KeepCT3. I just want to say something else about Ned Lamont, and then we'll stop too. Today. Well, first of all, as far as the pictures, I love that idea. And there was a picture also that came out today of Will Haskell and Chris Murphy standing close to each other, not socially distancing, without masks on. So are they going to be fined? I don't know. We'll see. But Lamont was asked point blank I didn't hear it, but my wife told me this. During the press conference today, he was asked point blank, what do you think about this Pennsylvania decision? The one I mentioned at the beginning of this broadcast.
Yeah. Really?
He was asked where they struck down Governor Tom Wolf's executive orders as being unconstitutional, a federal judge. What do you think about that, Governor? I'm not familiar with that. I haven't read it. And he turned to everyone else there, his little staff, his little posse with Josh Cabal and all the rest of it.
Oh, Josh Cabal, don't even get me started.
None of them knew about it. We'll have to consult our general counsel. We'll have to ask our counsel about
Tong?
that.
Tong is in his pocket.
Well, not Tong, the counsel in the governor's office. But anyway, they didn't even know about this huge decision that should have governors all across the country, especially in blue states, shaking in their boots. This was the top breaking news. It was on every news station. It was on Twitter. It was the number one thing, or one of the top things trending on Twitter.
Oh, yeah. That's where I saw it.
He didn't even know about it. He didn't even know about it. Neither did anyone on his staff. That's how tone deaf these people are. That's how brain dead these people are. They're not in touch with the people. They're not in touch. That is the number one story that should have been on their minds, unless they were just lying and they didn't want to address it. So that was their way of getting out of it, to say, I haven't seen it yet. But if during tomorrow's press conference, they're going to bring it up, and he's not going to have that excuse anymore. I hope they do. I didn't hear anybody ask him about the issue of the black churches and the vaccine. They should have, because it was a huge story in the Courant yesterday, and it was also a story in the Connecticut Mirror this morning. So I'm very dismayed if they didn't ask. Again, I didn't listen to the whole press conference because I was busy, but my wife listened to it, and she told me, but I don't think they brought that up. I'll have to go back and see if they did, but I really was hoping that they would. I'll go back and watch it tonight, I guess. But I was really hoping that they would bring that up, because that is a huge story. And it's not, luckily it got some press attention, but You hit it. You heard it here first, folks.
That's awesome. I appreciate it. Oh, a comment just coming in. Tong is suing Exxon for commercials encouraging climate change. There's where attorney. Don't even get me started. We could keep going on, and we should probably wrap up.
I know we could. If we're going to just have a bitch session about the government in Connecticut, Jen, we could do a 24-hour marathon just on that.
We totally could. So let's tap in again soon and talk about the mask lawsuit and other developments that I'm sure are going to be coming up. And a special session. Pay attention, guys. It's coming up next week. And we don't have confirmation that they're going to mandate the flu shot or bring that up. Or do we have confirmation about them completely repealing the RE? My prediction is they're going to come in and they're going to try and take away the RE first before they mandate these. That's just my prediction and my opinion. So that
would make sense.
Yeah.
That would make sense, because if you still have the RE, then what good is a mandate? Everybody can just use an RE.
Yeah. I mean,
unless they make the mandate not subject to the RE, carve out an exception that this particular vaccine you cannot use the RE for, but you still have the RE for everything else. They could also do that. There's a lot of different things they could do. But to me, this close to an election, they're crazy if they do that, because most people in the general public, and that includes Democrats, do not want to be mandated to take a COVID or a flu vaccine. The flu is one of those rare vaccines that even people who are pro-vax don't like it.
No,
and a lot of people don't get it. And the same with Gardasil, right? Yeah. That's one of those rare vaccines that even if you're pro-vaccine, you believe in all the rest of vaccines, you have hesitance in that one. And the COVID is like that too. So those three, HPV, COVID, and flu, are the three top ones that people don't want to get. And so if any of those are mandated, that's political suicide, in my opinion. So for them to be raised that 5 weeks, 6 weeks before the election is just idiotic if they do that. And there will be a massive protest. If that's up for consideration, I don't care. Listen, you want to find me $500 or $850, go ahead. Okay. Because I have a right under the Constitution, under the First Amendment, to assemble, to protest, to use my freedom of speech. I will be there. I can stand 6 feet apart. Okay. Technically, that's not breaking the order, because the order is only when it's not practical to stand 6 feet apart. So fine. Maybe I'll be off in a corner 6 or 8 or 9 feet away from people, but I will be there and I will be protesting, and I will be, if that comes up, you can guarantee that I will be there and I will be speaking out against this. And I'm sure all of you will be as well. That is one that's worth gathering the masses for. They're going to have to be writing a lot of fines. Their hands are going to be getting cramps, because they're going to have not just a couple hundred fines. They're going to have a few thousand fines that they're going to have to write for people if they do that.
Insane.
And that's probably another reason he's issuing this right. I just thought of that right ahead of the special session, because he doesn't want people to be able to protest the special session.
That's what I'm thinking. That just popped up into my mind, that it's very, very possible that this could come up, and they know that we're going to show up in force. And look, folks, no matter what, these are the times that we really have to stand and be brave. This is what we need to do for the sake of our children, for the sake of our freedom, for the sake of our liberty. We cannot let fear push us or stop us from showing up and protesting. There is a protest plan for October the 3rd. I plan on being there. If somebody finds me, I plan on taking every legal step that I possibly can within my power to fight that. And I think that if enough of us stand up to this, then we will eventually win. I definitely look at other states to leave Connecticut at some point, but I'm still here to fight, and I'm going to fight until there is no more fight left. And as far as I'm concerned, the state of Connecticut still has a lot more fight, and that's because of all these good people that are part of the Connecticut Freedom Alliance and various different other groups that this is broadcasting in. It's because of your efforts and your activism that we've been able to sustain this long and keeping our freedoms. And this is really the battle of a lifetime. And I also think that you just can't run from stuff. We are in a state where it's very extremist liberal, I'm going to say. It's just an extremist type of, and I was a liberal, okay? This is what drives me crazy. All right, but I'm not into this extremism. I would have considered, if you would have talked to me in 2014, 2015, 2016, right? I would have described myself as a progressive liberal, okay? So Del Bigtree says this all the time. He's like a political maroon. So me saying this and people calling me a right winger, I just stand there and say, my God, what a wacky world we're living in, because this is just total BS. But
Well, remember what Roseanne said, and I know she's been dragged through the mud because she was accused of being a racist too. But remember what she said? She was on she was on a talk show. I don't know if it was Seth Meyers or one of those late night shows, and she said, he said, "What happened to you? You used to be a liberal." She's like, "I didn't change." She said, "It's all you that lost your damn mind."
yes,
You know, I didn't
yes,
change. I'm still the same.
that's
You just went so far off the deep end. You know what I mean?
that's the way I feel. I've always had this feeling where I wanted to, I've had home births. I homeschooled my kids. I've always been, a very vocal activist in the state of Connecticut for all the years I lived here.
Yeah.
And exactly, I don't feel like it's the whole mentality of the extremist liberal left. It's extreme. It's an extremism that's just dark and ugly in my opinion, and I don't want anything to do with it, and I don't want to support it at all in any way, shape, or form. And I fully walked away, fully, completely, 100%. And I honestly think that the whole DNC should be deconstructed. But we should.
I know we can go on all night.
We can go on all night.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, let's do it again, Brian. And thank you guys for hanging out and watching. And stay strong. We are in this together, fighting, boots on the ground. So in that respect, that's not propaganda. That's truth coming out from we the people. We the people have more power than we realize. So all right. On that note, good night, guys.
Good night.